That doctor's an idiot. He's so fortunate to have the option to do so because most people would not be able to do that. Fuck them. Zach Highley, I just quit medicine. Why I left.
I've left medicine. This isn't clickbait. This is real.
The real deal. You see a lot of people posting videos about how they quit full-time work as a doctor for part-time or locum tenens, but looks like he actually quit.
My name is Zach and I was an internal medicine resident in Boston. I put 10 years into getting to where I was, MCATs, 40 hours a week of studying. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do it for myself, for my colleagues, and really for my patients. So I left medicine at 29 years old. For context, I did 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of post-bac experience, 1 year of kind of working experience while I was applying to med school, 4 years of medical school, and then I just finished my intern year of internal medicine in Boston.
When applying to medical school, the traditional route is you do 4 years of college and then immediately go into 4 years of medical school. That's what I did. And then you do residency after that. Now, what's becoming more and more common is the non-traditional route. It's funny that it's called non-traditional because now the majority of students actually take 1 or more gap years between college and med school. So oftentimes people do 1 gap year and then they do their 4 years of med school. Sounds like he did 3. So he did 4 college plus 2 post-bac plus 1 working gap year. So that's 3 years in the middle, but not very unusual.
And after that, I left. But I've always been super interested in the human body. I've always wanted to know kind of how the heart pumps, why these certain muscles squeeze like that and your leg goes like that. I've always been interested in that stuff, and that's really the main reason. And I wanted to know how it affected like real, living, breathing people. So undergrad, I did biomedical engineering. I worked on these really cool projects which were goggles that would brighten or darken to change your to like avoid jet lag and stuff like that.
That does sound actually really cool.
I worked on targeting HIV so we could cure HIV forever. And I remember thinking, this is cool. These are things that really could change people's lives, like forever. But I realized that in order to make those impacts, in order to be the one doing those things, I needed to be a doctor. So I did it all. I became an EMT. I started volunteering at these different places. I did more research. I checked the boxes. And interestingly, I got better scores and grades than I did in my entire life. Like I was scoring the best like I ever had in my entire life. And I realized it was because I had purpose. There was something I was gonna do next. It was gonna become a doctor. I was gonna change the world. I was gonna be among the select few that had that training, that knowledge, and of course had that prestigious doctor in front of my name. I would be Dr. Zach. There was nothing. There was nothing else I was gonna do. I couldn't do anything else. But in order to do this, I had to take 3 gap years. Imagine that, 3 whole years, nearly an entire college time to just get in to medical school.
That's not required. Again, a lot of people do go straight over. Nowadays, it's 1 or more gap years. Him doing 3 is the minority, and I don't want you guys to think that you need to do 3 gap years. Generally, people do gap years when they need to bolster their application. I don't know what his GPA was. I don't know what his MCAT was. I don't know what his extracurriculars were like in college. I don't know how serious he was versus how much he was having fun in college, right? These are all factors that come into play. You don't have to do 3 gap years.
Imagine the insane amount of resources that go into this. The insane amount of money, the insane amount of time, the insane amount of opportunity costs that I'm spending just to kind of get into this school, to get into a medical school. That always blows me away. Because you know, other countries and things like that, they go straight into medical school, they go straight in this thing. But I needed to get these courses, or medical schools just wouldn't even look at my application. I don't regret that time at all, but the amount of time and resources that just getting in to medical school is crazy. It's crazy. That's why there's all these businesses around getting people into medical school and stuff like that.
Like Med School Insiders. Want to clarify though, that you do not need to take multiple gap years. So I, as an example, went straight through. I also didn't rely on any kind of services or companies like Med School Insiders at the time. So while we definitely make things easier for people and help strengthen their applications and get them into more medical schools and more prestigious medical schools and actually save them money in the long term because we help them get scholarships and all these things, It's not required. I was a very hardcore student, and you guys can learn all about my story in other videos, but I was able to go through the process by myself, self-directed, made some mistakes, which is why we created the pre-med roadmap course, teach you some of those mistakes so you don't repeat them, and worked really hard and did a lot of research and experimented with different things, and now we culminate that and teach that to people so they can repeat the process and also get, you know, like as an example, I got the #1 scholarship offered by UCSD, so I didn't have to pay any tuition. Right? They give 1 out per year. So while these things are not necessary, I mean, take it from me, I did it without any of that kind of help. It does make it easier.
But then the day came, right? The day came, I had 35, because you got to apply broadly. You don't know what's going to happen. You got to apply broadly. 35 MD mainland schools that I was going to apply to.
Yeah, that's on the higher end. I also applied to too many, 40, but again, in other videos, I'll explain why I think applying to too many, like 35 as Zach did, or 40 like I did, is actually from a cost-benefit analysis. When you look at asymmetric risk, it makes the most logical sense. But all these other admissions experts out there will tell you to do 15 to 20 because that's what the average is. Anyways.
And I submitted my application. And it was freeing in a way, but it was also like the worst time of my life. In another way. It was freeing because the medical schools, they don't know what you're doing for that next year, right? So unless you update them, they don't care if you do research, they don't care if you go traveling. You don't have to share any of that with them because by the time you're kind of interviewing and admitted to the school, sure, you need to come up with something random to say, you know, when you're saying, they ask, what did you do during this year off and while you're applying to medical school? But other than that, the med schools, they have no idea what you're doing.
Okay, him saying that it was one of the worst times for him, I want you to keep in mind that everything is relative and keep some perspective whenever you can. When I applied to medical school, I remember working on my application and my secondaries. I was in a 1-bedroom apartment with my mom and brother. I shared a queen bed with my mom every night. My brother slept out on the couch. And at night, after my mom went to sleep, I would sneak in very quietly into the bedroom. It was a small bedroom, and use this tiny IKEA desk, literally half the size of even this, and just type for hours. I just like put on my headphones, listen to some EDM, and just type for hours. And guess what? It wasn't the worst thing ever. I found it exciting. I was working on my future. I was building towards this new thing. Now I know Zach and I come from very different backgrounds, which we'll get to later in this video, but keep that perspective in mind. I think it's very easy for people to focus on the negative. And you guys have to remember, I had a very freshly diagnosed inflammatory bowel disease condition. I'm sharing that 1 bathroom with 2 other adults. Anyways, want to remind you guys, maintain perspective. It's going to make the whole process more enjoyable, a lot more endurable too.
But at the same time, I was the most stressed that I ever was in my entire life. Imagine this. You spend 7 years working on this application. You spend $500,000 of your family's money, and you tell every single person you know that I'm gonna become a doctor. I'm gonna go to medical school. I'm gonna be Dr. Zach. And all that effort, everything that your whole mind has been becoming a doctor for like 7 to 10 years. There's been nothing else. It's just doctor, 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 student doctor network, Reddit, which are the worst places in the world. They're just forums where people,
I agree,
where people go and they tell you, oh, I got accepted. Oh, I had a 4.5 GPA and a 528 on the MCAT, and you know, I got rejected from, you know, your state school.
Which happens because their soft components aren't good, but people only focus on the hard components because it's easy to compare hard components, the objective metrics, the MCAT, the GPA, but you can't quite as easily quantify how good someone's personal statement, interviews, secondaries, etc. are.
But you can't help it. You're just obsessed with this because you've been obsessed with it for 7 to 10 years. And now there's the added emphasis, the added sunk cost, the added pressure of parents, friends, the money that you've put into this, your time that you've put into this. So that year, I couldn't do anything. There was no way I was going to be able to think properly or act normally, because just like...
We all go through this life journey at different speeds and different ways, but you cannot let the expectations of others cause so much stress that you can't think straight for a year. That's ultimately on you. It's how you relate to others, it's how you relate to yourself, the world around you, the stories you tell yourself.
Every day I was refreshing my email, waiting for an offer to interview or something like that, or an acceptance. That'd be a dream. And luckily I had some interviews to start out with. Like, I submitted my application 1 month or 2 months later, I had my first interviews, and I was confident. I was like, you know, I got this. I'm gonna be able to get into any medical school I want. I get to that interview, one of my first 2 interviews, and the day goes okay. And I'm like, okay, I got an acceptance. Now I can chill, I can relax. 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, double waitlisted. Double waitlisted. And then the stress starts to build a little bit. Some friends have been accepted to medical school. Some friends got into their dream medical school because they applied early decision or something. They interviewed early and they got in. I have a few more interviews, I have a few more wait lists, I have a rejection, and I start to kind of question myself. And around this time, things started to get kind of bad. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, and things I didn't tell my family and friends, and I'm really close with my family and friends, is that I was the most stressed I'd ever been in my entire life. I had my first, and luckily only, panic attack.
This is painful for me to hear. I mean, this is such a bummer that the experience of just applying to medical school can cause so much stress, so much anxiety, so much, I mean, that it sounds like that whole year, or at least several months of that year, were not pleasant. And what you guys have to remember is that if you remind yourself that you've gone through tougher times, we all have different setbacks and struggles. Some people have more than others. If you come from a background where you did have setbacks and struggles, remind yourself of those. Remind yourself, oh yeah, that one thing, that was way worse than this and I could handle that. Of course I can handle this. And you can do things like fear setting. You can build up the worst case scenario in your mind.
Okay, I don't get into med school, and then, oh my god, this, what's gonna happen?
Okay, let's actually take those fears and write them out on paper. What happens if you don't get into med school? You realize that it's not all that bad. And when you approach things by saying, I'm just gonna give it my all, and if things don't work out, that's cool. Because I'm giving it my all, because I'm working hard, opportunities will arise, whether it's getting to med school this year or next year, the year after that, or maybe I find some adjacent pathway I wasn't considering before. It doesn't have to be this unpleasant when you're applying to med school. And I don't want you guys to feel that way.
Every single person you know is asking you, oh, did you hear back from your medical school applications yet? Oh, which medical school are you attending? Have you thought about when you're gonna move? Have you thought about how you're gonna study medical school? I haven't even got in to medical school yet. And every single day you're refreshing an email. Every single day you're looking on Reddit or Student Doctor Network to see if other people got into medical school. And every single frickin' day someone's asking you, did you hear back? Did you hear anything? And I really wanted to say, no, I don't have a, I'm not gonna curse on this thing. I really want to say, I don't have a frickin' single acceptance. Your whole life is getting this admission to medical school. Your whole life is being a doctor. Your whole adult life is, how do I get the best scores? How do I apply the best way? How do I suck up to these people the best and get the best recommendation letters? And it doesn't change. I'll give you that. It doesn't change.
It does change. It's all about how much you want to get sucked into the game. And based on what I'm hearing so far in the story, I don't know Zach. I haven't watched his videos in the past. I know of him. I'm guessing that he's a more anxious person at baseline, and maybe some other strategies at that time would have helped. Making sure you're not checking Reddit and SDN every day. Making sure you are connecting with your close friends and sharing the med school process with only the close people that you feel that they would understand and respect space that you would need, or like, hey, please don't keep checking in, things like that. Oftentimes we also make it such a big part of our identity when we're pre-meds and med students that if this doesn't work out, it's gonna be catastrophic to our sense of self. Again, this is painful to hear, right? I feel for Zach, and I know there's a lot of other people out there that have similar difficult times applying to med school. It doesn't have to be so miserable. You guys can do it in a way that is far less unpleasant. I don't want to say fun, but I would argue that during the interview process, there should hopefully be moments of enjoyment as you're traveling, meeting new people, seeing new things. And even if you're waitlisted, that at least means that you're good enough on paper that these programs want to speak with you in person.
I'm practicing every day to try and figure out how to do better on interviews. I'm answering the question 9 million times, tell me about yourself. Why do you want to go into medicine? And an extremely annoyingly dumb question that I received is, if you were a piece of furniture, what piece of furniture would you be?
Dude, I have not heard the first, I've heard like cereal or something, but furniture. Oh man. If only he had access to our med school interview AI course where you use AI to actually have a conversation and practice, because doing the practice questions a ton is helpful, and you can do that with one person in your life. Hopefully they are MDs that have admissions committee experience, because if they don't, then it's not gonna be nearly as insightful as doing that with someone who does. So yeah, you wanna do ideally mock interviews with a physician who has medical school admissions committee experience. And we do offer that at medschoolinsiders.com. But to get a ton of reps in, he's saying he's answering these questions, hyperbole 9,000 times, whatever. You don't wanna keep repeating the same thing and not improving, and you need feedback to improve. So then we also created this interview AI course that uses a very sophisticated AI algorithm. It's custom made, it's not just like a ChatGPT wrapper or whatever. It is like a real conversation. The only tell is that there's a slight latency for them to respond, but it's wild. You guys can actually try it for free, no account, no login, no payment. Interview.medschoolinsiders.com. That would have actually helped him in terms of getting more feedback and changing his answer rather than just repeating and practicing and practicing. You wanna keep getting feedback, and ideally getting feedback on not just what you say, but how you say it too. Things like your body language, your tone, your cadence, your filler words, all things that the AI actually gives you feedback on. So for those who are interested, interview.medschoolinsiders.com.
Refreshing Reddit, refreshing Gmail, blah, 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 blah. And nothing comes in. No more interview invites, no acceptances at all. No new wait lists, nothing like that.
Okay, so I'm curious how many interviews we had. We do a lot of reapplicant work. And when we're looking at a candidate to see why they didn't get in, you want to get to the root cause. So you can obviously look at the GPA MCAT, and people that come in with a super high 4.0 and a 525, okay, obviously it's your soft components. And those who have really weak numbers and don't even get any interview invites, that's something to work on. But let's say you're in the middle where your numbers are good enough, then you ask yourself either do you have interviews or do you not? If you don't have interviews, it's something in your application, your primaries, your secondaries, your objective metrics, something there. But if you are getting a few interviews and no acceptances, then it points to your interview skills. And those need work, those need development. And again, when you come at it through this lens of trying to improve and learn and being curious, then each of these obstacles, each of these roadblocks becomes a learning opportunity, a way to improve and grow. When I face tough times in my life, I got a shoulder injury and I'm having foot pain and whatever, it's not, oh, woe is me, this sucks, oh my God, this is like, now I can't do cycling as much, I can't do straight, oh.
And oh my God, my body fat is going up and this is like...
Okay, zoom out, learning opportunity. You're going to have better understanding of body mechanics. Like every obstacle can be reframed in a way that benefits you. So Zach in this process is not looking at this through the lens of, okay, if I'm getting a lot of interview invites, but I keep getting rejected or waitlisted, I should be examining my interview skills.
It's beautiful though, right? If you can't tell, I was so inspired by that neurosurgeon video. Like, I have nowhere near as good a story of that guy, but I loved his video.
I had a lot of thoughts. I did not love his video. Dr. Goobie reaction right up here.
And I started thinking, what happens if I don't get in? What happens if I don't get into medical school? What am I gonna tell everyone? Do I apply again? What am I gonna do for the next year? I can't do more courses, right? I can't just work somewhere again. Do I leave medicine? Do I go into engineering? What am I gonna tell everyone? What am I gonna tell everyone? What am I gonna tell everyone?
Who cares what you tell people? Doesn't matter. Dr. Seuss, the people that matter don't mind. The people that mind don't matter. I think Zach cares a lot about the perception of his peers and what other people were thinking, at least at the time. I'm not sure if he's outgrown that or not. And we all go through that. It's a very common stage in whatever Erickson's stages of development and such, and especially in adolescence when it really peaks. It was actually probably very challenging to make this video, so kudos to him for doing so. I remember when I did it back in 2018, I don't think I cared really what people thought. If I recall correctly, I don't think there were any videos on YouTube about people quitting medicine, doctors quitting medicine, right? I think I might have been one of the first. So that makes it extra unknown because you have no idea how the audience is gonna receive it. But I also remember just not giving a fuck because I think I was forced to mature at a faster rate than other people just based on a lot of shit happening in my childhood and early adulthood. And you get perspective to say, it doesn't really matter. As long as you feel you're doing the right thing, and you're living by your standards and you're doing what you think is right, you're avoiding doing what you think is wrong, you're acting in an upstanding way that you're proud of, it doesn't really matter what people say.
My failure? Like, who are you? If you're not a doctor, who are you? If you're not a doctor, who are you?
Again, a lot of pre-meds take so much identity into this thing. You're more than that, you're a person.
I told everyone I was a doctor. And the chance that that wasn't gonna happen was like, I think they talk about it in psychology, it's a cognitive dissonance.
Well, cognitive dissonance is when you essentially have two conflicting beliefs. And here it's not two conflicting beliefs, it's you believe and you want to be a doctor, but you are not sure whether or not you will get in this cycle, which is not really cognitive dissonance, it's the uncertainty and the fear of being perceived in a negative light by the peers who are expecting you to be in med school.
And I just interviewed at my dream medical school. Honestly, my top choice medical school, a place where I would love to go. It was near my family. I love the teachers, I love the curriculum, I love the people that were there, I love the program. And I just had a good day there. The vibes were there, which I think is huge.
The vibes are so important when choosing med school.
I was reading all these student doctor network forums and Reddit forums, and they were saying, you know, if you get accepted to this medical school, you'll get a call a week or two later from the dean of admissions. And I was sitting in the office one day at this job I was working during my gap year, and I got a phone call. So I said hi, and then I heard on the other phone, "Hi, this is the dean of admissions, Miss blah 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 blah. I just wanted to let you know that you've been accepted to the best medical school ever." I said, "Are you serious?" They said, yeah, you've been accepted to the best medical school ever. I hope you'll attend." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'll be there a month early. Don't worry, I'll be there. I'll be there. And then she said, "Okay, nice talking to you, Zach. Glad to see you in the fall." I don't remember when this happened, but I was just on my knees. Like, I was just on my knees in the office. I wasn't crying or anything like that. And I was
It's okay if you were.
It was a moment of just pure release. I can't put it into words. And it was excitement. It was joy. I was calling every single person. They were asking me, and they said, "So what did you hear back from Hayes?" "Well, I got accepted, motherfucker, to my top favorite medical school. I'm gonna be going here. I'm gonna be moving here. You're gonna see me. I'm gonna be doing this." Then the excitement went away. It went away.
We build up these moments in life, these accomplishments and achievements as, oh, once that happens, then I'll be happy. And you hit it, and then you're happy, and then it fades away. I remember for me, MCAT, this is actually a topic I want to cover in another video, maybe on my car channel where I go into this kind of stuff more. But I think for the longest period of time, I always expected less from myself. And I just thought I wasn't smart enough or good enough, or I wasn't like one of those kids. And therefore, I remember I still remember the moment when I opened my MCAT score. And I was in the elevator at UCLA coming down from like some class. And I was trying to contain my excitement in the elevator with like there's a girl and a guy on either side of me. And I'm just like so stoked. And you feel great for the rest of the day, or maybe it's the week. And then you go back to baseline.
I started to think about, how am I gonna research what I wanna do? How am I gonna study better? What Anki flashcards am I gonna do?
I think it's both a blessing and a curse that we have social media now for pre-meds and med students, because the reason I started Med School Insider is that first ever video, how to study better, what I wish I knew in college. I created that because most people, myself included, did not know how to study properly in pre-med and in early medical school. And you learn through being forced to learn how to study better in med school because the volume is just so high. So that's a blessing, right? I wish that I had a video like that when I was in college, because it would have saved me so much time. I would have gotten the same grades and then slept way more and exercised way more and had more social time and whatnot. But the downside is, if you're the kind of person that starts worrying ahead of time. I didn't even know what USMLE step was until the end of first year of med school, right? Like I didn't have any doctors in the family. I didn't have any mentor or someone ahead of me that was teaching me these things. It was all just, all right, one step at a time. And I say blessing and a curse because I wasn't that stressed by the process. I was like, cool, just one step at a time. Like, things are gonna work out. I'm just gonna work hard on my current stage. But now, as a pre-med, before he even started med school, he was worrying about Anki decks for med school. I didn't even know what Anki was until I got into med school, right?
And I wish someone hit me, slapped me, said, "Zach, do you know what you've went through in these past 7 years? Do you know everything that you've put into this? Enjoy it. At least for a week, for God's sake. At least for a week."
That's a good opportunity. When you have that realization, man, that is a good opportunity to reflect and do some journaling and talk to some people. And that is something about you that you want to work on, because that's otherwise going to haunt you into your future too. Really important insights there. Anyways.
The excitement passed pretty quickly. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't anxious anymore. The rest of that year was pretty nice, actually. I knew where I was going. All those feelings faded. Because now I could say, now there was none of that cognitive dissonance. I was going to be a doctor. And medical school is a dream come true. I love it. I'm learning what I always wanted to learn. The teachers are really cool. My classmates are so smart. They're so funny. They're intelligent. They're bright. And we're all working together to become a doctor, to change the world, to save lives. And I'm just like, this is...
Dude, there are two types of people in med school. Those who either love the beginning or hate the beginning. And it sounds like me and Zach were the same in that we loved the beginning. I actually did not like the clinical years as much. I still actually enjoyed them quite a bit. I think I enjoyed most of med school, but the preclinical years felt like just having fun and working hard with friends towards the shared goal. Whereas the clinical years, you're oftentimes isolated and then you don't get the control of your time. Long story short, spoiler, I left medicine and one of the things that I do really value is freedom, especially freedom with my time. So in the first 2 years, you do have much more freedom with your time because you attend a couple hours of lecture per day, and then maybe one day you have like a full day of class and small group. But then for the most part, you're studying on your own with who you want, where you want, how you want. I like that freedom. And again, you're studying the really cool stuff, the human body.
So, we had the white coat ceremony, and they said, first thing, keep everything confidential, and the first thing you're gonna do is do no harm. And I thought, that's silly. Of course I'm gonna do no harm. What are you telling me to do no harm? Our job is to heal people, right? I'm not gonna do any harm.
Risk to any treatment, including non-treatment. So doing harm is fundamentally a part of the profession. You try to minimize harm and you try to do risk-informed decisions that, anyways, I talk a lot about that, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what evidence-based medicine is and is not, and how to provide the best quality patient care, and a lot of my own experiences as a patient and the issues I faced. But I guess I go over that in other videos, and this video is gonna be plenty long as is.
We had meetings at fancy dinners, and it was amazing. It really was amazing. I think to this day it was one of the best times of my life, for sure. Those first 2 years.
And then you also look at the end of those 2 years, you look back, you're like, holy shit, I learned so much. I know so much information now. It's wild. It feels good.
And I had a big popular network. I had a girlfriend that I thought was way, way too good for me. I was getting higher grades among smarter people, and I was healthier. I was physically stronger. It was like my body knew this is good stuff. It was telling me, it was giving me that positive feedback loop to keep doing this. But the dream had to come to an end. And that dream ender was COVID. It woke me up pretty quickly from my dream. I remember it was only Zoom classes. I wasn't seeing my friends anymore, and I was just studying. And it wasn't that bad. I went home with family, I was studying, but I wasn't really exercising. The social network wasn't really there anymore. The girlfriend that I thought was too good for me broke up with me. It wasn't meant to be anyway. And my gains were were leaving me. There were gains goblins everywhere. There was no gym. Nothing was open.
The gains goblins! Dude, COVID sucked.
Second year of medical school, I'd be doing clinical rotations. I'd be with people, doing things, changing lives, cutting things.
Cutting things, can't forget that.
And so, the third year of medical school began. And it was time to do some real life doctoring. It's funny, I don't know about other medical schools, but when you do your clinical rotations, everyone stresses out about it. Everyone wants to do the best. They want to get all honors. They want to do the best scoring they can so they can do the best residency. The thinking never stops. The thinking never stops.
Again, it depends on how you want to approach it. Zach is wired in that way. I'm also wired in that way. I don't think it bothers me as much as it bothers Zach. But I have other friends, actually going duck hunting with this guy next week, and he's like, dude, I prioritize balance in every stage of my life. Whether I'm a pre-med, a med student, a resident, attending, I prioritize balance. And granted, he has some circumstances that allow him to prioritize balance, but part of it is also just an internal decision, whether you want to keep pushing and competing and trying to be the best. And my buddy went into family medicine, right? I think Zach went into internal medicine. And you don't have to really be a gunner and go for the top scores. If you do want to go to MGH for internal medicine or family medicine, yeah, you got to be on top of your stuff. But specialty choice is one aspect. I see what he's saying though. I know that in plastics, you keep working up this hierarchy, and then you're a resident, you're like, oh, I'm at the bottom of this totem pole now, I'm gonna work up, and I'm gonna become an attending. And then you get out of the system, and you're like, oh, all those doctors, they're just like kind of the same to me now. The hierarchy just totally flattened. So I get that, but part of it is the specialty you choose. Part of it is what kind of future you want in academia. Do you have to go to an academic program, or is community okay? But the biggest part is just internal. How competitive do you want to be? And if you're gonna play that game of being competitive, you gotta be okay with that, otherwise you're gonna be miserable.
Anyway, so you submit your thing for this rotations, and my first rotation was OB-GYN. If you don't know that, it's obstetrics and gynecology. It's exactly what you think it is. And all my friends said, you got the most unlucky out of everyone in the entire world. You're at the worst location. Everyone hates medical students there. You're a guy, so like women, when they're giving birth or having these GYN appointments, they don't want you to actually come into the room. It's gonna be the worst.
That's gonna happen to most everyone in med school. It happened to me, probably gonna happen to you. And what's really funny is that we very easily can point out all the times we got unlucky. Oh my God, this is so unfair. That's crazy. God damn it, I'm so unlucky. What about the times when we did get lucky? It's easy to forget those.
And they were so wrong. They were so wrong. I loved it. I loved every second of it.
I wasn't expecting that. That's awesome.
The patients. I loved the little surgeries, the C-sections and stuff like that. I was on the labor and delivery floor a lot, and you're kind of always on alert. A good way one of the attendings talked to me about is there's going to be a prize at the end. Whatever you're doing, there's going to be a prize at the end on the L&D floor. And you know, maybe that's a regular delivery, a vaginal delivery, or maybe that's the C-section. C-section I love because it was a classic surgery, but I loved it all.
A what surgery? I remember doing OB-GYN at the end of my third year rotations, and it was one of my least favorite rotations. Granted, I was going to one of the harder locations too, but a lot of anti-male sexism from female residents and the gay male resident as well. And then also the C-sections, after doing my neuro-ortho plastics and gen surge rotations, felt very different. And I remember having some run-ins with the attending where I would hold my hands close to me, you know, above my waist. I was taller than him, so the patient bed was lower. And he always wanted me to have my hands on the actual patient, but he was like throwing tools around and sharps. And I was like, dude, I do not want to get a needle stick. So I would just put them here on my, you know, my lower chest or upper abdomen. He'd always say, like, put your hands down on the thing. I'd be like, okay, I'd do it here. And then once he started getting crazy with the tools, I'd like go back up, try to not get a needle stick. And there were several close calls. Anyways.
Everything was going in the wrong direction, right? And I'll show you by that on the first day of the rotation. But then it completely changed when I actually was there. And I came in kind of with this excited attitude, and I feel like people felt it. They were pulling me into surgeries. They wanted me to do things. I was doing things that interns were doing, like putting in trocars, which are like these things that so you can see see your instruments inside the belly and stuff like that. I was doing incisions. I was bovying, which is like this, I don't know what it is actually. It's like a laser that burns stuff. It's another way of cutting stuff, but I guess it cauterizes.
Electrocautery is how you can dissect tissue during surgery. That's the bovy, not quite a laser. And then a trocar is what you put in the hole for laparoscopic surgery to maintain that open position and function of the tool. And
I loved it. But the first day of that rotation, the chief resident pulls us aside into an on-call room. She looks at us in her big white coat. We're in our little white coat. That's important. Remember, that's important. The longer the white coat, the more important you are.
Med students have short white coats. When you're a resident or attending, you have a long white coat.
It's me, a guy, and 3 other ladies, and then this woman, chief resident. She looked at me and she said, first of all, you're a guy, so you're not going to do anything here. Just deal with it. I said, okay. And she looked at all the rest of the girls and she said, you guys are going to be useless. I was just ignored at this point. I was put to the side, but I was just watching this, still stunned. And she said, you guys are going to be useless. You're going to accomplish nothing. You're only going to get in people's way. So please stay out of everyone's way. She walked out the room. We all looked at each other like, did that really just happen?
You're going to have those characters in certain specialties more frequently than others. OB-GYN, it might be a little bit more common than something like family medicine or internal medicine and whatnot.
Aren't we meant to be like teaching each other and like building each other up and educating each other and having fun and learning and changing people's lives? I don't know.
Yeah, but you find crappy people in every industry, whether it's medicine or other things. I do think there needs to be a change in the culture of healthcare, the larger picture. I'm glad that things are slowly moving in the right direction, but also don't let one negative interaction color your perception of an entire field or an entire type of clinician.
And the interesting thing was this OB-GYN chief resident with her big coat had about 17 pins on her collar. If you don't know a white coat, it's got this big lapel, and people usually put pins in there. And you know, it had American Humanism Society, love each other, kindness, and of course they were all in rainbow or pink or bright purple colors. And she wore those everywhere because she was, of course, a very kind, humanistic person.
Yeah, I mean, that person was a total tool, but yeah, there are those types of medicine. They chase the prestige, they want the recognition on various pins, and they, you know, I'm chief resident, and I'm this and I'm that, and I'm so important, and you're below me, and then you just kind of smile. You quietly judge them like, damn, that person must have a miserable life in an internal state, and then you go on with your life, and you realize that most of the other doctors you're working with are really cool people.
And I had a fucking fantastic time. I loved it. And then I went to internal medicine, I did some neurology, and passion, the excitement started to fade a little bit. And I wasn't really aware of it, I think, at the time, but I remember thinking to myself one time, when can I leave? And when I had that thought, I thought, that's interesting. I haven't really had that thought yet. When can I leave?
It's really normal to feel that on specialties you don't click with and then want it to keep going, or time just flies by on the specialties you do love. Very normal for med students.
What real difference are these doctors making? Are these people getting better? What are the medicines we're giving? And is there real kind of long-term benefit from these things we're doing for people? I wasn't sure. But then I went into surgery and my whole mind was blown away again. I was being scrubbed up. People were like washing my hands for me, gowning me, handing me things.
People don't wash your hands for you. You should know how to scrub yourself.
It's like, we're gods. This is what the gods, they talk about being gods in the OR. I was cutting things. People were like...
As a third-year med student, you're probably retracting and like cutting suture, not using a scalpel to make an incision in the skin.
I was holding things. I was pushing patients around. People were asking you questions. I was like, this is cool. I really like this.
Surgery life, best life.
But again, the initial kind of this is cool was kind of like thrown off a little bit by what is the people that are doing the jobs actually looking like? They were like, every resident was coming in at 4 a.m. and most residents were leaving, 9, 11 p.m. And I was starting to do math in my head, and I said, all right, it's 5 hours of sleep. Oh, you commute here an hour? Okay, 3 hours of sleep. You have to eat? Family? Interesting.
It is a complete joke how, especially in surgical specialties and surgical residency, we are those who are promoting health in our patients, and yet we compromise sleep. And over the last several decades, we've known how important sleep is to health and the ramifications of chronic sleep deprivation. And yet, because of money, because of the system prioritizing cheap labor and profits over actual resident education, because you actually get better retention, better learning when you can consolidate that memory with deep sleep, we overwork our residents and we get, I would argue, worse patient outcomes. Although I guess depending on the study, you could say it's equivalent patient outcomes. And I think the root cause of it is just money. Hospitals wanting to make more profit, squeezing the residents for every last drop that they can, and even having them do scut work and such that they could really just use mid-levels for, that doctors are not going to need to do in the future. But I've called many wound vac companies myself when I was a resident in plastics and even a med student that I would never be doing as an attending physician anyways.
They all were drinking some form of caffeine, Monsters, Red Bulls. This one guy actually took caffeine pills.
That's the worst way, man. You don't even get to enjoy the flavor and the smell.
Every morning. I was like, that just takes the fun out of it. You can't even have a nice coffee or anything.
Exactly.
And again, I don't want to take away from what these people were doing, because they were doing amazing things. But it was the surgery culture, I don't know if it was for me.
By the way, surgery culture does vary a bit between surgical subspecialties. You look at plastic surgery versus general surgery versus trauma surgery versus neurosurgery versus orthopedic surgery. There's a lot of overlap, but they're also quite different. But yeah, of course ENT, which is definitely quite different.
It was a little bit of like, I showed up at 3:30 and you showed up at 4. I stayed for this extra case. And a lot of times it felt like these surgeon residents were
masochists.
Like, that's what they needed to do to look good to the other people so they could get to the next step in their career, which is this feeling that I also had, but I didn't like it. Shouldn't I be doing things because I really want to do them?
You get a bit of that in residency, a lot less so. And again, it depends on, going back to the same conversation, mostly just you as a person. In med school with your clerkship rotations, you're really trying to get that honors and whatever. In residency, you're doing it to help out your fellow co-residents. And you want to be a hard worker, you want to take pride in your work, but you're helping them out and they're going to pay the favor back in the future when you're on call. And when you're getting slammed on the ED, you'll handle the other stuff and vice versa. There was definitely way, way less pressure for this whole performative aspect of it in residency compared to med school, big time.
Isn't paying the dues, shouldn't you have fun while you're paying the dues? I mean, if I'm going to be doing this for 11 years in the beginning, shouldn't I have some enjoyment in this? Shouldn't I not sacrifice all my health, all my family time? And that quickly became the most important question. Do you like it enough? And what are you willing to sacrifice for it?
Well, only do surgery if you can't see yourself doing anything else, because the cost of surgery is very high. But in other specialties, it is not nearly as challenging to live a more balanced life. I'd argue, again, friends in family medicine, anesthesiology, radiology had way more balance. Internal medicine has its ups and downs, especially when you're on ICU and such.
One of my mentors to this day, a brilliant guy, a cardiothoracic surgeon. I remember I was kind of following him around one day and he was putting a chest tube in the patient. And in a real moment of honesty, a moment of honesty that I have with no other attendings, no other residents, no one that's gonna grade me, right? And I remember I talked to him and it was after, you know, a couple 20-hour days. And I was saying, I don't really know if this is worth it. I don't know if I like this that much. He says, Zach, you only have to answer one question. Is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know. But then, of course, performance mode Zach jumped in and he said, yeah, of course the juice is worth the squeeze. I want to do this and I love patients and performing these procedures and I want to be the best there ever was. Like no one ever was.
In med school, it's a lot harder to have those open and honest conversations with attendings. You're just too far removed. It's a lot easier to have it with fellow med students or residents, actually. There's a lot of cool residents out there. And because they're not very far removed from where you are in med school. But when you are a resident, it's much easier to have those conversations with certain attendings as well, because you're not as far removed versus being a med student. And you're not having to perform for an honors.
And I remember around this time, my YouTube channel started popping off and I was doing like cool things. I was like, oh, this is for fun. I'm like helping people. I'm talking about my failures, my successes. And now people are paying me for this. And now people are like inviting me to things. Like I met like Mr. Beast and Dr. Mike, and I was like, holy shit, this is cool. Who would think that doing this would create those kind of outcomes? I wouldn't know that. But I was like, you know what? I'm a doctor. This is cool, but that's who I am. Being a doctor is the most noble profession. This is the right thing to do, to be a doctor.
One of my buddies tells me that the whole idea of should and should not is ultimately very toxic, something that I'm working on as well. But we obviously know where this is going, and I think seeing what happened in pre-med years and in his med school years, I'm not very surprised by that.
They started talking to me about specialties, but I didn't want to live their lives. Internal medicine seemed like a decent life to live, and I still would learn about these different parts of the body and science and things like that. So I said, you know what? Internal medicine it is. Gastroenterology seems pretty cool. They get paid a good amount of money. A lot of people are doing it. I kind of like endoscopies and colonoscopies. I think I'll be a gastroenterologist. And this is where things get a little crazy because, or at least I think they're stupidly crazy. I started to think about fellowship and I was shadowing gastroenterologists and going to see scopes and doing research in that area. And I remember thinking, wait a second, Zach, you're not even a doctor yet. And you're planning 5 years ahead in your life? What are you doing?
It's good to know the big picture of what it takes to become a gastroenterologist, to know whether or not you're willing to do the 3 years of internal medicine plus the 3 years of fellowship. But you probably don't need to be researching actual fellowship options at this point.
I was preparing my answers for the residency interviews. Why do you want to go into internal medicine? Well, if I gave the honest answer, I'd say, you know, I didn't really have too great a time in internal medicine, but I don't think I could do surgery or OBGYN because the lifestyle outside of it, I just couldn't do. So internal medicine seems pretty good. I kind of liked it.
I'm curious what he thought about psych, peds, other things beyond, and you also get elective time too. So maybe he did electives in anesthesiology or radiology or whatever. But internal medicine is the default catch-all. If I don't know what to do, I just default to internal medicine. And I have many friends who did that, and some of them are very happy now as attending physicians.
Yeah, think again. Your answer can't be that. This has to be what you've dreamed of forever. You saw a patient who had this randomly weird hand, and then you thought of diamond black fan anemia. And so you looked it up in the most recent journal of hematology. You presented this year to an attending physician. You ordered a $3 million lab test, and you diagnosed diamond black fan anemia and saved that person's life. And so I knew from that day that I was going to be an internal medicine doctor, and that's why I'm here today. Thank you very much. There, remember that. That's a residency answer. Now, why do you want to come to this school? Here's the answer you give. I can't think of any other program I want to go to. This is the best program in the world. I love this doctor that's doing this. I love it's so big because I get to see a huge diversity of patients. I love that it's medium because I get to see, you know, a medium diversity of patients, but I also get that small culture feel. I love the small sized hospital because I love to be really knowing everyone in the hospital, get to know what's going on. There. Repeat that 11 times during your 11 residency interviews that I had, and congratulations.
Not wrong there with like customizing your answers to the program, but there's a right way and a wrong way to do it in the sense that you don't have to feel like a phony and bullshit it completely, right? You can include or omit certain values that you have based on the program to make yourself interview better. There's a lot of cynicism here, which is not unfounded, but it's also not necessary.
But in the moment, then, I still felt like I'm gonna be a doctor. I'm gonna have a white coat. I'm gonna get prescribed medicines. I'm gonna figure out how this whole medicine thing works, and then I'm gonna make my big engineering invention, my big device, my big drug that's gonna make a real impact. What I always wanted to do. Really make an impact on a lot of people in a meaningful way.
I actually fell in love with how you can use new devices in particular to transform patient care. And I talk about the whole story with Blue Link. You can even find possibly some links to that on my personal website about the story. And I think that is real impact, right? When as a physician, you're still making a real impact one patient at a time. Doing it through these other more scalable methods makes a larger impact in less time, in the sense that you can create a technology that makes childbirth so much safer in Africa, and as a result, you're saving X number of lives per year just from one technology that's cheap and affordable. And you know, it's a really exciting space, and with his biomedical engineering background, that would actually be a great fit for him.
And so I said goodbye to all my really good friends that I made at medical school. We had parties, and I was like, wow, I've been working for 10 years at this point to get here. Now I finally get to do it. I got into my third choice residency in internal medicine in Boston, and I started to meet my co-residents. And I got the big long white coat. I got that nice badge, and on the badge it had this big in green letters, MD. So everyone knew I was a doctor. That was my status among the world, was from this green 2 letters on my thing. And maybe sometimes when I was leaving the hospital and going to the Whole Foods, I would forget to tuck in my badge, and I'd just leave the MD showing there because I was proud. I'd gotten here. I wanted to show off a little bit, but there was no crash course on medicine. There was no guidance to what you say to a patient that says they're really scared, or they're in pain, or they don't want to die. There wasn't that. They were living, breathing, awfully scared, awfully happy, awfully angry, awfully amazing, and awfully real patients, people that were in my hands now. In my awfully, I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing hands. And I had to take care of them. I had to do my best to do that. Of course, I had a huge support system. I had the residents, I had the attendings, I had medical students, I had nurses that knew way more than me, I had techs that knew way more than me, and they were all helping me out.
That human side of medicine, more and more medical schools are creating threads and courses to handle those difficult conversations, which I'm fortunate that UCSD had that. I found it very helpful. Also working on that with a team of really brilliant guys on this communication platform that is, again, related to the interview course, but this is a different direction. And it's a hard part of clinical medicine, but it's what makes it so rewarding, is connecting and having that human interaction, the vulnerability, the connection, the comfort, helping someone beyond just looking at their metrics, right? Making an impact on that person emotionally, connecting with them.
And I remember my first ever emergency situation. I was sitting in one of the workrooms where we just sit typing at computers. I got an emergency message on my phone, which means it wakes up the whole room, and it said, come to room, blah, 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 blah. The patient fell. So I dashed in my long white. It's really hard to run in the long white coats quickly. I never wore that long white coat again. I dashed to the room. I saw there were big lights blaring in the hallway. People were standing looking inside this room, and I walk into the room, very important, and I say, what's going on? And there's 9 people in the room. There's techs, there's nurses, everyone like that. My patient is on the floor, crying, in pain. They said she fell and she hit her head. What do we do? And I said, can we just get her up? And then one of the nurses looked at me and she said, well, we should probably stabilize the C-spine because we don't know if she fell her head. She might need an x-ray, blah, 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 blah. The med student's with me. And I tell the med student, go and get the attending and the resident. I say, okay, interesting. And so I go to talk to the patient. I say, Miss Jessica, what happened? And she's just not telling me anything. And so I'm just like, okay. I start to listen to the heart because I don't know what I was doing. I was like, what do I do? 30 seconds later, which felt like 30 years, my saviors come in, they get an x-ray of the spine, they sit her up, and everything's fine, and she's fine. And I remember thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing.
That's okay. As an intern, you're gonna feel it a lot. That's normal, that's fine. I felt that several times too. And I remember just being in awe looking at my PGY4, who I'm still in touch with today because he's such an amazing human being. And just the way that he was able to comfort patients and how personable he was. His bedside manner was impeccable. And he just knew everything. And it's not about, oh, I suck. It's like, he's 4 years ahead of me.
I have no idea what I'm doing. They were doing physical maneuvers that I must have forgotten. They were doing things with their hands that looked like magic. And then they sat her in the bed and she was fine. And I remember thinking those nurses probably after that went into their secret room, the whiteboard where they have a picture of every single resident, and they said, Dr. Zach, never message him again. And I went back to my room. And I remember I was writing my note on the chart on this patient saying how I severely screwed up and didn't know what to do with the patient, blah, 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 blah. And I looked on the side of the chart and it said the patient's been here for 135 days. I said, how is this 135 days? I haven't even been a doctor 10% of that time. And I looked through the chart, no new medications that we're doing, no new surgeries that are upcoming, no imaging procedures, nothing we're gonna have to do in the future. Why can't we get this person out of here? Home, a rehab facility, something like that. And I remember asking the senior resident, I said, why can't we get this person out of here? Like, what are we doing? She's just gonna keep falling. People go to ground. Like, what are we gonna do with this person? It's dangerous for her to still be here. And he answered me almost like a McDonald's drive-through attendant is telling a customer, listen, like, we're out of fries. Sorry, like, there's nothing we can do. We're just out of fries. And he said to me, yeah, well, this person has all these comorbidities. They have alcohol use disorder. Their insurance isn't really great. They're homeless. So there's really, you know, nothing we can do. I said, so this person just stays here forever? And then he's like, well, yeah, for now. And then he's like, did you have a good learning experience from that? And I said, well, I've been here 4 days, so pretty much everything is a learning experience. And he didn't hear, he wasn't even listening. And he said, almost like now he's the drive-through attendant and he's like, you know, we can give you a free extra packet of ketchup because we have no fries. And he says, you know, you probably didn't get much learning from that interaction. And I was like, well.
I like Zach's storytelling. Entertaining.
Again, I'm learning. This is all new. I just don't know what's going on. He's like, what I'll do is I'll see if we can transfer them to another service. That's good, right? We'll transfer them to another service, and then you won't have to deal with these things anymore. I said, oh, okay. And then the patient was transferred to another service. And quickly, my first ever emergency situation that I failed dramatically in handling was transferred to another medical service. And I quickly learned that this was kind of the way a lot of things work. There are really silly reasons why a patient might go to this service or that service. People were kicking out patients to go here, accepting patients to go here, adding on random things in the notes so the patient could be billed in a certain way or sent in a different way.
I see where he's going, and I hope it's not going to be the whole black and white, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater from Dr. Goobie's video. Medicine as a whole has a lot of room to grow, and many changes and improvements need to be made, but it also is saving a ton of lives. And it's hard to talk to the nuance, the gray area. It's a lot easier to think in black and white. Look at politics. But the nuance is where the truth is and where the actual serious discussions, the meaningful change can occur.
And it was a lot of this stuff that wasn't about how do we make this person better. But it seemed to me maybe 25% or 1 out of every 4 residents and attendings I talked to and dealt with was really passionate and excited to be there, to be a doctor.
He makes it sound like it should be 100% or 90% or 80%. A couple thoughts. Number 1, you're in an academic setting. Find doctors that are not in academia. From my experience, a higher percentage of them love their job. There are pros and cons to academia, but anyways, also personality types and whole nother discussion. The other thing is, I don't think optimizing for and using a binary passionate or not is a good way to assess how valid a career path is. Because many people in various career paths will go down a route because of passion, because of interest, because of whatever reasons. And passion can wax and wane, it can come and go. Many of my friends who are physicians are very grateful for being physicians. They're not as passionate as they were when they were pre-meds or med students, because it is still a job now. It's more routine. It's a little bit more, you know, you get the pattern recognition. More days look similar than different in a way. That doesn't mean that they're unhappy. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad profession.
And I think I'm being honestly nice with that number, of course, anecdotally. But if you look at statistics and stuff like that, you know, it's something crazy like the average is 45% of doctors would choose to do their profession again, 40% are experiencing burnout, and the numbers vary for specialty to specialty, but it's real.
It is a real issue, and it's something we talk about elsewhere. But again, I am allergic to. He hasn't done black and white thinking, but he's using the storytelling to very much push things in a certain way. I am allergic to black and white thinking because you lose all nuance and you lose all seriousness in a discussion. So I'm being the balancing act here to make sure that we're not getting too far in one direction.
I think I actually really did save one person's life. But that wasn't it. The great part was when you were with someone and you felt like you did something good. The person would come, they'd pull you aside and they'd say, listen, Dr. Zach, you made me feel better. I was really, really scared when I came into this hospital. And you sat here and you talked me through what was going on in my body and my medications, and you told me everything was gonna be okay. Or you told me everything wasn't gonna be okay, but you were honest with me. And that felt really good. And I'm really grateful that you were here to talk to me for this. And I was like, oh, this feels good. This is what it's meant to be like. I get that warm, fuzzy feeling. And it's a real person in a really, really bad time that in their moment of extreme vulnerability, extreme fear, I was able to be the light in their darkness. That felt really, really good. However, the times that happened was maybe 5% of the time, maybe 5% of the time. 95% of the time was spent on electronic medical records, insurance.
Yeah, guys, you're not going to be saving lives every single day. I mean, maybe you are depending on what you go into, but you got to remember what's the bread and butter of any specialty in medicine. What are you doing day in and day out? That's going to be the bulk of your time. And if you're not okay with the bread and butter, that specialty is probably not right for you.
Dealing with difficult administration, dealing with difficult patients, a lot of it was stuff that I didn't think being a doctor was.
And that's why it's so important to get exposure, right? Do your shadowing as a pre-med. You're gonna get a lot of exposure in med school as well. Watch our day in the life videos or So You Want to Be videos. You gotta understand what medicine is and is not. And yeah, the EHR takes up so much time nowadays, especially in certain specialties. Like you look at emergency medicine, why is burnout there so high? EHRs are part of it. Neurosurgery has lower burnout rates despite them putting in way more hours than EM doctors on a weekly basis. But they're spending more time operating, less time charting. Charting is a result of money again, optimizing billing, not optimizing for patient care or for doctor efficiency. Maybe billing efficiency, but not actually the act of doctoring.
You know, that's okay. I know this is part of medicine, this 95% of stuff is, but this 5% is worth it.
And again, the 5 versus 95, let's not talk about precise numbers here, but let's talk about something very important here. No job is gonna be 100% or 90% or even 80% just sunshine and rainbows. You wanna be a YouTuber? Guess what? There's a lot of business and taxes and LLC and legal and yada, yada, yada. It's not just sitting in front of a camera and being recognized by people when you go outside.
I don't know if it is for me. And 2 months into being a doctor, I asked myself that same question that Dr. Okasanya asked, and he said, is the juice worth the squeeze? And I wasn't sure. I really wasn't sure. And this set off a kind of many phone calls. I had conversations with happy doctors, sad doctors, electricians, woodworkers, nurses, technicians. I spoke to anyone I could about what they were doing, why they were doing it, if they were happy about the reason they were doing it, if they were happy while they were doing it, if they were doing it because they needed money. What was the reason they were doing the things they were doing? And I realized I needed to think really critically here. This was a huge decision. Was I really considering leaving medicine?
I did the same thing. I reached out to a ton of attendings and residents and friends because it's a huge decision to leave, especially for certain specialties where you can't go back, right? Huge decision. You do not want to take this thing lightly.
And so for 3 to 4 months, I talked to as many people I could. I did a lot of research into happiness of doctors and kind of what our interventions of doctors have done for people, what medicine has done for society. And I learned quickly that it seems like, you know, we've done very good work with infections. Us stopping these infections, preventing infections, or treating infections has saved lots of lives. It has. It's brought the life expectancy up, and people not smoking as much, that's changed a good amount of lives too. But everything else, the impact's kind of small. It's kind of small.
Oh boy.
It's kind of small.
This is a Dr. Goobie 2.0 video. I see what Zach is trying to say here, but he's factually wrong. You can go, actually, I summarized the whole Peter Attia Outlive book, and at the beginning of that book summary, we actually talk about medicine 1.0, 2.0, and 3.0, and medicine 2.0 is what we're currently in. And it's a lot of acute injuries and such, and acute conditions, whether it's infections, trauma, etc. And he's right, we haven't made much progress in cancer, in most cancers, but people really, really, really downplay the advancements in healthcare. And when you don't see as much improvement in certain outcomes and certain measurements of quality of life and such, they go and blame medicine when in reality you can't blame medicine because medicine isn't the root cause. The root cause are the lifestyle factors. The root cause, people being too sedentary, people being addicted to social media, people being addicted to their Netflix, people not exercising, people not eating clean. And these are things that if you are intentional, you can work around it. But in American culture, and I have many acquaintances and extended family members and such, they expect medicine to be the Band-Aid. What do you mean I have high blood pressure? Give me the right pill. This doctor was an idiot. He gave me the wrong blood pressure medication, and after 3 or 4 different times, then they finally got the right one. That doctor's an idiot. Really? So you think that the doctor should be able to just write a magic drug for you to fix your high blood pressure when you realize your high blood pressure is completely caused by your lifestyle? And standard of care, they need to try a few different medications in a certain order based on the pros and cons of each and the tolerance and the dosing and whatnot. So you think the problem's the doctor. It's this kind of thinking, this victim mentality, this give me the magic pill, that is the issue. And you can point to various things that contribute to that. But if you're gonna tell me that the issues with Americans is because medicine isn't doing enough, medicine has things it needs to improve. But let's not mistake that the lifestyle issues that are causing a lot of the chronic diseases are lifestyle issues. And do you really expect a doctor to be able to fix all that? Because a lot of doctors I know do a ton of counseling. And guess what? That motivational interviewing that we all learned in med school and these various tactics to bring about lifestyle changes works for some people and it doesn't for others. Because changing people's behaviors when they are so rooted in a certain way of thinking and living is easier said than done. And it's definitely not the doctor's fault for not being able to reverse that.
We have impacts, right? But the amount, if you would measure it, is at least from my viewing of the literature, is not that big.
Yeah, that's just totally downplaying the advancements of Medicine 2.0 completely. And what most of us learned in med school, I guess he was facing this more in residency, but what most of us learned in med school is that we know so much about the body now, and we have so many amazing treatments, but there's still so much we still don't know.
Really struggling. I was struggling with this decision because I didn't know what to do. No one does this. In America, you don't get into a residency program and leave. There's no part-time. This is your life. I've been doing it for, 80 hours a week. I've been put 7 years into this. You don't quit.
People have been quitting residency since there was residency. I mean, even when I was considering quitting, again, there were no other YouTubers that had been making these videos, and it was higher risk for me to go public, right? Because now we have so many people that have done it. But back then, I wasn't looking to other YouTubers. I was looking to other residents in plastics at my program or other programs in prior years that had quit. And I just wanted to make sure, okay, cool. So people are doing this rarely, but they are making this decision. They have some other promising thing that they're going to. I may be not as crazy as I might think.
I've been put 7 years into this. You don't quit. You at least maybe you finish all 3 years.
Yeah, internal medicine is 3 years. He did 1, he had 2 to go. Sunk cost fallacy, but also cost benefit analysis. Is it worth 2 years to finish IM? Because that does open more doors when it comes to wanting to get involved in other non-clinical opportunities, which we talk about in another video.
You become a hospitalist, you have a backup plan, or you do a fellowship, and then you change to corporate. And then you transfer to another job. And then you pursue your dreams.
Switching to corporate, then pursuing your dreams. Don't know who's saying that, but okay.
I was thinking to myself, okay, 6 months in, if I want to become a gastroenterologist, I have another 2.5 years of this, I have another 3 years of this, and maybe 1 to 2 years of this before I'm a full doctor. That means I have to repeat what I just did 20 times. I have to repeat this 6-month stretch 20 times, because that's 10 years. I thought there's no way I could do that. There's no way I can do that. If I do that, I'll be a zombie.
But then you're also assuming that it doesn't get easier as you get more used to it, as you have more experience under your belt. You're assuming that it's gonna be your 6 months of intern year again and again and again, which is not the case. It's gonna be easier at times. It is actually gonna be harder at times, especially when, again, you're on ICU in internal medicine. That's a illogical thought there, to say that you have to repeat that 20 times.
And of course, the counter argument is, Zach, you're an intern year. Intern year sucks. Everyone knows intern year sucks. It gets better. When you're a senior resident, you'll have more time. You don't have to write notes anymore. When you're a senior attending, you really just don't do that much. You get paid much more money. Maybe you work in administration, so your time isn't that much clinical. It's more office work. But I saw a lot of zombies. I saw a lot of senior resident zombies. I saw a lot of fellow zombies. I even saw nursing zombies or technician zombies. But I knew if I did that another 20 times, I would be a zombie. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. I don't think zombies even like juice. Maybe brain juice, but probably no other kind of juice. So I decided I was gonna leave medicine. I spoke to family, I spoke to the program director, because I've thought about this for 11 years, and I've thought about it intensely. Think about like at least 2 hours a day for the past year.
I can relate to that. Several months prior to me making my decision, I would mull it over. I would journal. I would have my spreadsheet with the pros and cons that I talk about in the video of why I left. My whole like pros, cons, fear setting, notes, etc. It's a big decision. So you do need to reflect on it regularly.
And graduation came around. I remember those last 3 months were actually nice. I still tried to do the best for my patients. I tried to do the best for my medical students as I possibly could, because I remember being there. And I would hate to have a checked out doctor deal with me. I would hate. And that was my big fear. That was my big fear, is that I would be a checked out doctor.
I respect that a lot. Not wanting to be a checked out doctor and making the system worse. Because as a patient in GI, actually, who has had many gastroenterologists, there's a wide spectrum in how invested and engaged my providers have been. I shouldn't say providers, my doctors have been, my gastroenterologists have been. I respect that a lot. What are you saying there?
And so I went to the graduation. We're all sitting around this nice dinner that the hospital was throwing for everyone. I love my co-residents. We're amazing people, and it's one of the people I miss. I miss to this day. I miss hanging out with them. I miss chatting with them. I miss shooting the shit, honestly. Great people. And you have to love these people because you're with them so much.
And also they're pretty similar to you, because to end up in med school, and then you're already really selecting down from the people from high school to college to med school that probably share certain types of values in common. And then from med school to the same specialty in the same region, you find cool people. You find some great friends. And
then I got home. I slept a lot. I walked outside a lot. I talked with family a lot. And I realized very quickly that this was the right decision for me. This was the right decision for me.
Hell yeah.
And the metaphor
happy for him.
I was probably, for that entire year, operating at 15% on battery savings mode. And I knew that not during that year, but during the past month when I've been home. I have more energy. I'm happier. I was able to get a haircut.
Yeah, you don't have much time in residency to do even regular errands because you're working 6 days a week. Yeah, that's interesting. For me, I think that I got so used to sleep deprivation in college and in med school and in residency that, and I didn't rely on coffee. I wasn't drinking coffee or tea back then. By the way, tea and whisk, link in the description. My go-to for loose leaf oolong teas. It must have taken at least a year or two to get normalized to the sense of not having that cortisol, adrenaline upper from being sleep deprived and sleeping 7-8 hours most nights and exercising 6 days a week rather than just 2 to 3 days a week. Actually, I was still exercising a lot because I would ride my bike to and from the hospital, but those are such short rides. You're like, on the bike 20 minutes a day, 10 to 15 minutes tops each way, probably more like 10. But it sounds like very quickly for him, he knew he made the right decision. That's great to see.
It's like I feel like a better person. And maybe that just is sleeping and exercise and eating. And maybe I just needed to do that there. I don't know how I would have done that in residency. I don't know.
I felt a lot healthier as well after I left. But I will also add the caveat that I was doing plastic surgery residency. A surgical residency does tend to have pretty rough hours, rougher than non-surgical. And then I was also building Med School Insiders, and I was building MEM, and I was also quite involved as an advisor with BlueLink, biomedical incubator I started. So I was in full workaholic mode and deriving too much of my self-identity and self-worth from how much work I did, which is a whole nother discussion and not sustainable, obviously.
But I also feel afraid. I've made a decision that I'm sure many people on the internet, which I'll see soon in the comments, many people around me said, not to my face, that I'm making a dumb decision. You're being selfish. How can you give up on the patient? How can you give up on this profession? There's hundreds of thousands of students that would kill to be a doctor, to kill to be where you are.
Oh, dude, yeah. I never heard that in real life, but I got some comments from people saying, oh, you took a spot in med school and residency and yada, yada, yada. And that limited way of thinking, you have to remind yourself that there are a lot of people out there that aren't very serious thinkers. They're not very intelligent if you actually try to dig deeper in their thought process, there isn't anything there. So those that say, oh, you took this spot, yada, yada, yada. I'll say for me, first of all, plastic surgery, there are so many people that want to go into that. I didn't take a seat from anyone. That seat got filled like that. The number of people that go unmatched every year is also huge. So again, no issue there. And as for taking up a medical school seat, I would say what I'm doing now adds a lot of value to the future generations of physicians. The med school seat argument still doesn't even make sense because ultimately the residency is the bottleneck. And we have more med school seats than there are residency positions, which is why you have so many people that go unmatched. The whole argument falls apart. And even for Zach, I don't know what he's gonna do in the future. He's gonna probably get to that later in this video. But even if he was completely no longer relevant to medical education or medicine, it's not a wasted spot.
How can you possibly be so selfish, so superficial, that you would quit?
Oh, and the other thing people say is, oh, we gotta root out people like this from the get-go because they're the ones who are taking up spots and I would have loved to be in their position and I wouldn't have quit. Cool, bro. How are you gonna do that? People change, well, hopefully they change and grow and hopefully improve over the course of their life. And the way that you thought when you were 21 years old applying to med school is probably different than when you're 30 years old, or he's like, what, 29 or something. And that's okay. Some people will have a change in heart, or change in priorities, or change in values, or change in what they want out of life. And guess what? Going back to when they were 21, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between those who would change their mind and those who wouldn't.
And maybe they're right. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're right.
No, dude, fuck them. Fuck them. There's so many haters. You know, when I first quit and I was making videos in my mom's backyard on this channel, I got so many people saying that I was an idiot for quitting. I'm gonna be just a YouTuber and I'm gonna totally regret this. And then fast forward a few years, business is doing better, things are working out. And now the haters, they switch the story. Now it's, oh, this guy was just a wannabe finance bro that just was in it for the money and found something else that's gonna make him more money. It's like, you're never gonna make people happy. It doesn't matter. You gotta do what's right for you. You, your loved ones, that's the priority. And other people, if they support you, fuck yeah, they're your allies. And everyone else, they're just irrelevant haters. Who gives a shit?
So the good, the bad, and the ugly of residency. The good was the camaraderie, the patience, and this constant like growth and improvement mindset. The bad of residency was the sacrifices you make to time, fitness, general life, and also some of the administration kind of BS. A lot of the BS is the bad, basically, that 95% which I talked about.
I also want to say that I have multiple friends in internal medicine who were able to live balanced lives in residency. They were just focusing on internal medicine. They still played basketball quite regularly, maybe not on their ICU rotations and certain inpatient rotations, but they didn't say it was all that bad. And there were ups and downs. I just don't want, I'm trying to add balance here. So I respect Zach's decision. I'm happy for him. But I also don't want his experience to color your perception of what internal medicine residency is, or rather color it in a way that is not fully accurate.
The ugly is the destruction of brilliance. I don't think I'm brilliant in any way, but there were brilliant people there. There were brilliant residents. And some of them squeeze through, but many of them are they're just destroyed. They get smaller as humans. They don't have exciting thoughts anymore. They saw it. We have to do this. When just 6 months ago, a year ago when I knew them, they were gonna change the world. But they were crushed. I don't know how to explain it. Again, it's really anecdotal, but there were just these people that were just ground down.
I think a lot of that is in residency, and you see those same people out of residency, the other end, and they get much of that vigor back. I think that it's ultimately something you see in a lot of very competitive industries and lines of work, is that it really grinds you down. And you know, the whole like, I'm gonna change the world thing when you're younger is a very common sentiment that whether it's, I know people in computer science, I know people in business, I know people like in a lot of different areas that have these lofty aspirations, as they should, and that's awesome, and you should strive towards them. But don't be surprised if not everyone changes the world. Don't be surprised if people's priorities change and they now focus on family, or they don't love parts of their work as much because when they were in love with their work, that's when they had an incomplete understanding of what the work actually was.
That was the saddest thing for me. That was the ugliest thing. Is seeing these really good people just get crushed.
The saddest thing to me was when I was telling friends and colleagues that I was leaving, that just about every single one said, I wish I could do the same. That was the scariest thing to me. And you talk to them now, and a lot of them are much happier now. either later on in residency or having been finished, but that was very surprising. I thought most people would say that I was crazy and what the hell are you talking about and what are you doing? But maybe those people were just being polite in some way, but out of the handful of people I spoke to, most of them, not all of them, but most of them said something along the lines of being very excited for me and wishing that they could do something similar. And that was a bit of a bummer.
So the main 2 reasons I left is number 1, I wasn't sure what impact I was actually making. And number 2, I wasn't happy. I wasn't happy. So that's why I left. Even the dogs left me now, I mean. But what's next? I don't really know. I really honestly don't know.
In the stories that I heard about people who did leave, they were leaving to something. They weren't normally, it was very uncommon to leave without a real solid plan in place because it is so high risk, but we're gonna get back to that in a second.
Thank you so much for watching, really, thank you. And I hope this helped you in some way. I hope it did make you think about kind of what's the good, what's the bad? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
I'm so glad when people make videos that are open and honest and vulnerable about their thought process because it benefits us all. And you may agree with it, you may disagree with certain parts, but at the very least, it's prompting a thought-provoking discussion. And I think that benefits us all.
This has definitely changed my life in a good way. I think that paints a picture of, I hope, at this point. If you don't know why I've left medicine at this point, I am a really bad storyteller.
He's actually a great storyteller, really entertaining. Now, before we wrap up, I want to show you some things on Reddit. People on Reddit are going to be highly cynical, but there are some relevant points. So, you know, a lot of these doctor influencers, they quit or they go part-time. They were never passionate about medicine. Again, see that point I made about 21 versus 29. And this is just virtue signaling this person. It's like, I'm so great, I'm going for the right reasons. Anyways, but they do make some valid points here. That his dad is Ivan Gurgel, and that he interestingly doesn't include, his full name is, I think, Highley Gurgel, but he only includes Highley on YouTube. And this is something I believe we should be disclosing because it does very much change the landscape. It does change the picture. So again, huge kudos to Zach. Thought it was a great thought-provoking video. I think what would have made it better is opening up about some of the reasons as to how he was able to do so. Because for most of us, myself included, we don't get any financial help for paying for college, paying for medical school, and then we take on our loans. Now, I was fortunate, worked my tail off, and I got that scholarship from UCSD. So by the time I was in residency, I had about 50K in loans, 20K from undergrad, 30K from med school, and smaller loan burden. And I had already started Med School Insiders before residency. I had already had some momentum and success in a smaller way, and I knew how to monitor. Like, the risk was a lot lower in the sense that I had a plan. I had these 2 great options of plastic surgery versus entrepreneurship. And of course, most people will have a background similar to mine, right? They're not gonna have as much of a safety net. When you put that into the equation, it completely changes the equation. I'm assuming that Zach doesn't have any student loans, or if he does, then they're small. And if he does have whatever loans, that his family would be able to help. It reduces the risk and it allows you to make certain decisions. And I am so grateful, and I applaud those who rock and acknowledge and are grateful for the privilege that they come from, the privilege that they have growing up, because you are just born into a family. You didn't do anything to deserve coming from a well-off family versus not. And I love my friends who are very open and honest and appreciative of that. When people aren't as open or honest or appreciative of that, I think it does more damage for the rest of us. I think it sets expectations in a certain way. You know, here, most residents feel trapped in residency if they want to quit, if they don't have something very promising to go to because they have 250K in student loans on average. And I get it, optics are important, but by failing to disclose that, and you can kind of tell from the videos, right? Like in his other videos, he's in this beautiful home and it's clearly, you know, not your regular home. It still shouldn't be something that we need to read through the lines. And I get it, we're on social media, we want to put our best foot forward. And even when we are being vulnerable, we're still calculated to a certain degree, right? And I mean, you can tell in other ways too, not just his home, but I mean, the guy's rocking a Omega Speedmaster, a $6,000 watch in his video. Actually, I bought one last year as my would have finished residency at this point present to myself. But as a med student or a first year resident, there's no way that you should be able to afford something like that. So obviously, and again, there's nothing wrong with him having the watch. And I'm sure that he would express gratitude for where he comes from. What I do have an issue with are those people, not Zach, who are those that don't acknowledge the privilege, right? Someone I know traveled for like a year and a half in their mid-20s And so they self-funded, and they were going around telling people, hey, you can do it too, you can self-fund this. And I was like, don't you think it's kind of damaging to tell people that when you clearly didn't self-fund it? She's like, what do you mean? I totally self-funded it. It was my money that I earned from my job. Okay, but were you paying for your own car insurance? Oh no, my dad did that. Your own phone bill? No, my dad. Your rent? No, my dad did. Okay, so you realize he was just subsidizing your living so you could then take that money and save up for travel. But most people would just have to use their money for the living expenses, not to save up for travel. And or another guy I know who had multiple 8-figure loans from his parents in his early 20s to start a business, and just totally downplaying how big of a deal that is to be able to. I mean, the whole risk-benefit, risk tolerance equation is completely changed. And I think that if someone just says, oh, hey, $50,000, that's not life-changing money. That actually is. Because $50K when you're 20 years old, you have so much higher risk tolerance to try various things, to invest in various business ideas, to see what sticks, versus when you're in survival mode. It's not the $50K. It's the way that it changes your opportunities and your mindset and your risk tolerance is completely worlds apart. And I want to make it clear, I'm not anti people that come from privilege, right? I just want us to have those discussions to make things realistic, because guess what? The other pre-meds or med students or residents who are watching this that may not know who he is or about his family, they may then have a warped sense of reality or perspectives because they don't understand that he's so fortunate to have the option to do so. Because most people in his shoes would not be able to do that. Financially, it would be prohibitive, completely unreasonable, completely way higher risk, right? I mean, even for me, I only left residency. Well, my whole story is another topic, but I had something that was profitable and a plan and some experience in business over the last several years in med school and such, starting the incubator and starting Med School Insiders and now working on this new company, MEM. And being in that position is very special and unique. And he's not bad for being in that position at all. That's awesome. That's like, for my future children, I would love to give them opportunities. But I also want my future children to be very appreciative of that and acknowledge that and be open and honest about it, to not give off an inaccurate impression. And maybe not even giving an inaccurate impression, but leaving out a very important part of the equation in the discussion. A really important part. Anyways, I'm not saying that Zach is trying to be purposely deceptive. I think Zach made a great video. I just think that to not include such an important part of the decision-making process that is one of the biggest reasons why people feel like they would not be able to do the same thing, I think is not giving such an important discussion the full opportunity that it deserves. My friends, see you in that next one.